All right, good evening and welcome to another edition of Aluta Continua, a collaboration between the Social Newsroom and Africa Uncensored. My name is John Allen Namu. First off, our apologies, we were supposed to set out at about 6 p.m., but unfortunately we had a few challenges with our live stream. But we are live now on YouTube, on both the social media pages of the Social Newsroom and Africa Uncensored. Whichever is your choice, whichever is your poison, you can pick it and choose that link. We're also going to be live on X Spaces throughout the course of this conversation. So if you have something that you want to say, something that you want to chime in about, please do. We'd be happy to hear your thoughts. The conversation today is about an incredibly important document, one that's very close to my heart and possibly, if not probably, close to the hearts of millions of Kenyans across the country. And so I thought of doing something a little differently, Mark. Rather than come up with an introduction to this document myself, I thought, why don't we ask ChatGPT what it would say about the Constitution, but in the form of poetry, right?
Okay.
So I have a poem that we'll begin with, right? It's called A New Dawn. This is what ChatGPT came up with. So if it's bad, it's not my fault. All right? But if it's good, it's me. All right? So it's called A New Dawn. Before we introduce our guests, let me start and see whether it kind of fits in the sentiment. In the heart of a land where the savannah sways, where the acacia stands tall under golden rays, a promise was born in the heat of the day, a covenant written to light our way. Voices once silent now echo with might, a chorus of freedom breaking the night. The ink on the parchment, a beacon of hope, a bridge to tomorrow, a lifeline, a rope. The dream of a nation, diverse and strong, found its rhythm, its heartbeat, its song, in every word, in every clause, a testament to justice, a pause for cause. We carved out our future with courage and grace, bound by the values no force could erase. The rights of the many, the voices of the few, each stitch in the fabric that binds me to you. From the hills of Nyeri to the shores of Mombasa, the spirit of change spread like the fragrance of cassia. In the courts, in the fields, in the heart of the city, the law stands as a guardian, both stern and gritty. But with all journeys, the path is not straight. Challenges rise, and with them, debate. Yet through the storm, through the trials we face, the Constitution stands as a symbol of grace. 14 years on, and still we tread on the road to justice where our forebearers led. The Kenya we dreamt of is still being made. In the light of that promise, we march unafraid. So here's to the ink that gave us our voice, to the dream we pursue, to the people's choice. For in the heart of this land, under the Kenyan sun, the journey of freedom has only begun. Tumpigie ChatGPT makofi. Well, that prompt was made by yours truly, John Allen Namu. I'll be taking credit on behalf of it. But the conversation doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us online. But there are some people who have great context on the conversation that we're having tonight. 14 years since that chilly morning in August when we promulgated the foundational document charting our way to our future. And one of the people who was involved, at least at the parliamentary level, is a person seated to my immediate left. Former member of parliament, lawyer, Abdikadir Mohammed. He's going to tell you how deeply involved he was in the constitutional making process. Thank you very much for making it this evening. It's been a very long time, and it's good to see you. Yeah, and right next to him, Marilyn Kamuru, lawyer, governance consultant, good governance consultant, right? Right.
You don't do bad governance.
You don't do bad governance. We'll leave that to some other people, right? And to the man who mimified our hopes and aspirations, right? Court process server, human rights activist, human rights defender, the one, the only, the people may, the people shall. Michael Kojo, thank you for joining us this evening. And obviously, to help me chart the way through the conversation is Mark Masai. Mark, please take it away. Do you have something as fancy?
I don't have anything poetic, but I have something constitutional. Not by ChatGPT, but it is from Article 1. and of the Constitution of Kenya.
That's even better.
Yes. But that was a creative way, and it answers in many ways the initial question, the first question that we have for our panelists. But we'll hear what they have to say based on their interest points and their experience in the 14 years that they have witnessed what I'd call, I don't know if I'm right to call this a Gen Z constitution, because it was birthed in the years that you would say, when I ask GPT, who is Gen Z, the years that it was born. So 2010, this is a Gen Z constitution. So Article 1, sovereignty of the people. All sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this constitution. The people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or through their democratic elected representatives. Sovereign power under this constitution is delegated to the following state organs, which shall perform their functions in accordance with this constitution: Parliament and the legislative assemblies and the county governments, the national executive and the executive structures in the county governments, and the judiciary and the independent tribunals. The sovereign power of the people is exercised at the national level and the county level. Words that he reminded many of us, perhaps some weren't keen. That's the last guest that you have introduced to us. That is Michael Kojo Otieno from Homa Bay Massive. He describes himself as a human rights activist and defender. Someone seated close to him also is an advocate of the disability rights, and that is Senator Crystal Asige. She also wears many hats, and that's why you saw her do this when you did your poem borrowed by ChatGPT, because she's from the musical side of things, and perhaps will belt a tune for us to dedicate to the Constitution on this commemoration of 14 years. And next to her is Maura Kabata. He is a vice president of the Law Society of Kenya, and that is an institution that is, well, must be represented in this conversation of the Constitution. Now, and ladies and gentlemen, asanteni nyote, we are either beneficiaries or victims of the Constitution that we live under, or at least the circumstances that we live under. So I'm sure we all have thoughts. So we are all experts to that large extent. And I will start with Abdi Kadir in the initial question, and we'll also go to those who are joining us online. Having chaired the committee on the Parliamentary Committee on the Review of the Constitution, 14 years on, do you see it having lived its purpose, or is this Gen Z or teenage constitution by years, that is 14, still in its baby years?
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here, and thanks for the invite. Yes, I do. I think we need to understand what constitutions essentially are about. First, constitutions are for organizing a society, organizing the infrastructure, the organs of a society, and they are also for limiting power. Before we became a republic, we were a colony. And before we were a colony, we were a protectorate. And before we were a protectorate, we were the legitimate son or child of a British parastatal. That did not bring us together. The independent constitution and the independent movement brought us together. But in my opinion, the real Kenya was born 14 years ago when the Kenyans voted to be part of Kenya and voted to give themselves a new country, so to speak. So we are not a monarchy. The Constitution is about the relationship between the people and their government and their institutions. That Constitution is necessary for Kenya to exist. So while we are a work in progress, definitely, we must celebrate the fact that we gave ourselves, we the people of Kenya gave ourselves this beautiful document. And it's a beautiful document if we were to ask anybody who knows anything about katibas. Now, that does not answer the question, 14 years later, have we met the ideals we set for ourselves? And that's a big no. And the reasons we will go into. But I think we must start by celebrating that we were at a low moment in our history. after the violence and the deaths of so many Kenyans. And we, the people of Kenya, came together and did this national project of such moment that everywhere in the world, at that moment, everybody celebrated Kenya, and all Kenyans celebrated. So I think it's absolutely necessary to celebrate this day and our Katiba. Thanks.
Marilyn, would you call this a day to celebrate, given what we have as a constitution, but also contrast to the reality that we live in under that constitution? And
100% celebration. I love calling it a national project, that, you know, the Constitution was a national project, because that's really what it was. And, you know, the language that I really love in the Constitution is the people of Kenya give themselves. This is a thing we gave ourselves. And the reason why I really like that language, first of all, is because as a woman, every time we're fighting for representation rights, people keep telling us, you know, you need to wait your turn, you need to do all these things. And I'm like, you realize this was the first constitution where women constitution makers had an active participatory role. So women gave themselves this constitution. We gave ourselves these rights. They weren't given to us by men or by the state. And so for me, I really think that this is an important moment. And, you know, for me, I kind of feel like we should be treating it like a birthday. Like, honestly, it is the thing that keeps the politicians in check. And even though we feel like, even though we know that they continue to act illegally and in ways that violate this constitution, they are restrained in ways they would not have been without this document. And it is a protector of ours. In ways that I think we understand sometimes and that unfold for us in many ways. I loved watching the protests and seeing people, you know, really exercise the right to protest and the right to hold representatives accountable. And that comes directly from a constitutional right, but also, when you call it a Gen Z constitution, it is that the air changed. The air we breathe changed. We suddenly were not a fearful people. We were people who gave ourselves something that was aspirational, and we continue to walk towards that future. So definitely a moment of celebration for me.
No, it's a good way of putting it, a celebration, a birthday, and a rebirth in a sense of the nation. And you mentioned politicians, the political class. One of the people who's, at least on the floor of the Senate, that I've seen numerous times, Senator Asiga has made very brilliant speeches in defense of the Constitution and defense of the tenets of the Constitution. But I want to ask about the social fabric within politics, especially, you know, legislative politics. Do you feel that the Constitution lives and breathes and is appreciated much in the same way that it's appreciated outside of the political realm, inside or on the floor of both houses?
Thank you. I think that we have a good Constitution, but in the wrong hands. That will be the summary to that question, but I'll elaborate because we're on our show.
Please do.
And I like how you started, and in the second line of your brilliantly composed poem.
Thank you.
Yes, all copyright to you. In the second or third line, you talked about a covenant.
Yes.
And that really struck me, because we all know what the meaning of a covenant is. For me, covenant, of course, is a promise made between two parties that both will do a certain thing, and which, if broken by one party, then there'll be a consequence, right? For example, if I give you my money, or my loyalty, or my vote, you must promise to keep your side of the bargain, or the consequence of breaching our agreement will be on your hands, right? And when I say that it's in the wrong hands, right now we're in 2024, and we are going to speak directly about the current executive. Mm-hmm. When the president came into covenant with the sovereign power, us, and promised countless things, he never sought to know the consequence of not keeping his promises to us, right? He never asked what's next if he failed to keep his covenant with us. And I think that what we have seen in the last few months, it's been bubbling for several months, but, you know, has really reached its climax in the last two or three, is civil unrest. And I believe that civil unrest is a cause of a covenant being broken, promises being broken, and societal agreements that have been broken. And that's what we're seeing today. And in the legislature, unfortunately, we have people that, for me, I think, or rather I see them as being gagged, a gagged majority. I feel that we have a very distant international community, and we also have a mute private sector. And with all those three things put together, then of course legislature are toothless. We don't really have any sort of guiding star, which is supposed to be this constitution. There is no North Star, unfortunately. And so when I'm on the floor of the House and as a minority member, trying to protect this covenant, trying to protect this constitution, and move legislation that is in line with the constitution, it's very difficult to do that, very frustrating, when you know that whether you look left or right, there is no way that this thing will be respected. And we have to remember that the constitution, our current president was not for it in the first place. So who are we to think that 14 years later, he will suddenly be a fan, right? And so these are the kind of things that we are battling with in legislature. Personally, as a person who is very anchored in integrity, the rule of law, doing things the right way, even if it's difficult to do them. Yeah. That's the kind of challenge that I have, and many other people on the minority side have as well. But generally speaking, we are hands tied.
Hands tied. That's a fairly, and I don't mean it of you personally, but a fairly shameful thing to admit as a legislator in a country, that you have such a rich constitution, but not the means to be able to enact it. Not so much the means, but the will, I'd say. I skipped over a gentleman before when I came to you, and I'd like to bring you into a conversation, Mr. Kabata. As Vice Chair of the Law Society of Kenya, you're charged with, perhaps the defense of the Constitution on behalf of not just the profession, but behalf of the public outside of the legislature, etc. What do you make of this statement, true or false? And you can elaborate. We have the Constitution, but not constitutionalism. Yeah.
The outright history that the Law Society of Kenya has with constitutional and lawmaking process is one that I think I may agree with the general sentiments from the room that indeed there is progress. We came from a time that almost saw the collapse of the Law Society of Kenya from unconstitutional processes where the state could have imagined, and this is a historical fact, that since the Law Society of Kenya is established pursuant to a statute from Parliament, then the easiest way of dealing with the Law Society is, repeal that statute, which was at one point something that the former president, now deceased, Honorable Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, brought to the floor of the House. The power in which the Constitution operates, or the constitutional limits, in fact, are the privileges that we enjoy as a citizenry, because as you delegate power, and every time I hear the phrase power of the people, I remember my good colleague, because I want to finish with may or shall. But on a very serious note, the power that is delegated, whether directly or indirectly, from an executive perspective as well as a lawmaking agenda, is done so through limits. Those limits are the operating tenets in which the Constitution foresees abuse or arbitrary use of power. And the Constitution is a living document because it then carries the historical aspirations as well as forecasting on a future agenda. So it takes the lessons from the past and brings them to the present, as well as wanting to forecast on what the future will look like. Now, I would want to call that specific tenet for purposes of the audience to also understand, because I understand that it's not just the legalism that is going around. Constitutionalism is the limits through which state organs operate in. The constitutional safety button that the Constitution foresees that since power can be exercised arbitrarily, and indeed sovereign power, usually in our parts of the world, is exercised arbitrarily, then it operates with limits through which that power shall be exercised with caution. And in fact, if you look at our historical context in which there were laws that were so fragrant with illicit constitutional protection, such that at one time it was a criminal offense to think about harm happening to the president of the country of Kenya. Now thinking is one aspect of looking at it, because if then a state officer would have assumed that you've just thought about it, then you immediately become a law offender. You become a criminal. And you see, this then was orchestrated in a state or a machinery that was funded by the state to suppress dissidents. And I pose a challenge and I say, even to the young Kenyans, this is not, in fact, a Gen Z constitution, because the aspirations, if you take away the 14 years from the progressive constitution, you get about 13 years. So perhaps, if you take the 13 years plus 14, any person when the constitution was promulgated, the youngest person will have been 13 years. Now, the political aspirations at 13 years, I don't think is that effective in terms of understanding. But the future of the Constitution shall be in the hands of the Gen Z. Because, and I foresee a Kenya in about probably 10 to 20 years from now that will be having a living document in the Constitution, because the realization of that Constitution is not clouded by previous, historical underpinnings on constitutional lawmaking. And I am happy that Senior is here today, because the perspective from where he stood at that time is really important in infusing the narratives that we are talking about. The constitutionalism aspect of it, now to just sum up, is that even the thought that power that is directly delegated can be arbitrarily utilized, can be, from a point of political action, what we saw about a few months ago, when the real owners of power, sorry my sister, but I know you are there and you explained it yourself. The owners of power went to the employees' place of work and asked for that mandate back. Legally, you can speak whatever you want to say, but a process that had found discomfort among a majority of Kenya, it is permissible within the constitutional reset button to see the history of what happened on that, was it a Tuesday? The Tuesday evening. And so you see, from a powerful president, an all-executive president, who would say in one night and wear the hat of the commander-in-chief, but then the following day wear a robe of a clergy, in fact, speaks to how the Constitution addresses the question of how power is exercised.
Interesting way of putting it. I want to come to you, Michael, because of the statement that's been made with regard to constitutionalism and checking the excesses that power might, engage with, right? Obviously, the audience here knows you for that really powerful presentation to NADCO, but you've been doing this for years. From a public interest law defense point of view, how many times have you had to go to court to defend the Constitution? And I guess it's another way of asking the same question about the Constitution versus constitutionalism. We tend to hyper-focus on politicians, for good reason, politicians and the executive. But maybe as you're summing up how many times you've had to go to court to defend the Constitution, do we find these excesses in other parts of society?
Yes, thank you very much, John, for having invited me and Mark to come to this baraza. First and foremost, I would like to say that I'm not new in this field for fighting for the rule of law. I started it while I was 19 years. We were the first batch of the young Kenyans who were at Uhuru Park at around as early as at 5 a.m. We were with the activist Mwangi, and I vividly remember we were wearing capes with the Kenyan flag, but they were perforated. I never knew the meaning of the reason as to why we were given capes which were perforated. They had lines for those who were there. So what I can attest and confirm is that if you say that sovereignty or the sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with the Constitution, the people may exercise their sovereignty either directly or indirectly through their democratically elected representatives. The biggest question any Kenyan citizen needs to ask, is it the leaders who are sovereign or the people who are sovereign? The Constitution defines it in affirmative that it is the people who are sovereign. And I would like, if one of the Baraza's members who are present here had the copy of the Constitution, if you read Article 3 of the Constitution, says that every person has an obligation to uphold, to protect, and to defend the Constitution. And if you go further to the Bills of Rights in Article 22, you have got that every person has got a right to institute legal proceedings if at all the Constitution is not being followed. And it has a repetition in Article 258. Those are the two repeated clauses in affirmative in the Kenyan Constitution. So that one clearly demonstrates that every person, whether unincorporated or cooperated, as defined under Article 260, you have an obligation to uphold, to protect, and to defend the Constitution. Secondly, all the authorities we have within the structures of the constitutionalism, that is, when you talk about the Constitution, you talk about the structure. A house of design. How is our house designed? How is the Kenyan nation designed as a republic? It is within the whims of the Constitution, which purports to put it in affirmative that it is the people. If you look at the executive authority, it is derived from the people of Kenya, because it is us, the people, who vote in the leaders we want. And if you look at Article 159 on the judicial authority, it still confirms in affirmative that it is with the people. The judicial authority is derived from the people. So when it goes to the legislative arm, it is derived from the people. So if you look at all the arms of the government in affirmative, John, it is the people who have got that power. Third, on the issue with regard to PIL, it has been informed to us when the clause of the locus was removed. Earlier on, the landed councils who were before this panel could tell you that you could not appear before the judges. They could tell you that you went to which law school. But I am from the school of thought that the leading principle for every lawyer, so for every man, is diligence. Leave nothing for tomorrow which can be done today. That is Abraham Lincoln. Why was Lincoln saying this? It is the people. Some of us are privileged that they have undergone through the courses, through the law classes. But if you look at the oath, all the lawyers who are present here, they normally take an oath, including even the elected leaders, but not the voter. What is the reason as to why a voter doesn't take an oath, but an advocate of the High Court has to take an oath, a sitting head of state has to take an oath, and a cabinet secretary has to take an oath, including even a governor, including even an MCA, including even the Chief Justice? It talks of the sovereignty of which it is for you to serve the people. And that is why I was informed by the clause of the article 1 of the Kenyan Constitution, vis-a-vis Article 3, of which, even including even the state organs, what binds us as a nation, it is the Constitution. It is not the leaders. It is the rule of law. So when it comes to appeal, I have a case before the court, before Justice Mwita. I cannot ventilate into the merits of the case. But there are cases, we've seen what has been taking place within the country, whereby even the advocates themselves are afraid of appearing before the judges, and yet they are taken an oath of upholding, defending, and protecting the Constitution. So we as the people, we have got that right under Article 22 as read with Article 258. And that one has made me to institute like, I have like 10 cases. I've won like 5 cases. I have one case as the East Africa Court of Justice where I've sued Mfumukeko, the former SG, whereby we lost a whooping $1.88 million US. And that case, it is not 3 years down the line. I've not gotten a date. And that one I was informed by Article 25, as read with Article 26, whereby it says that international law shall form part of the domestic law of our country. Any treaties and conventions ratified by Kenya shall form part of our domestic laws. So that one clearly demonstrates of what we as the people of this republic can do in ensuring that the rule of law is being followed to the letter. Otherwise, I'll ventilate much onto the other issues.
And we'll be joined by Honorable Naisula Lesuda, who's joining us from Samburu. On her way from Samburu, she wasn't able to be here. But you are, and I think he deserves, there was an attempt to clap as you were talking, but she didn't want to. Based on the 10 cases that he has at least pushed for in the interest of the people, let's give him a round of applause. The reason I do that is because you exemplify knowing the sovereignty of the people in yourself, in the actions that you've taken up. You don't have a law background. You haven't sworn an oath, as they have, the councils here have. But you are alive to the provisions of the law, and you are utilizing it. So let me ask you this just before I bring in Mheshimiwa Naisula.
Yes.
Do you feel, not using you as an SI unit, but do you feel majority of Kenyans understand or even grasp the power that they have to be a sovereign people?
No. Most Kenyans do not know it, including even the young advocates who are in law school. You can take through a young advocate, if you talk of the national values and the principles of good governance as anchored in Article 10, and you might ask a young advocate that which articles also share the same connotations in the national values and principles of good governance, he or she will be defeated. What is the reason as to why? The first document any law student need to study and know, it is the Constitution. Not the civil procedure rules, not the criminal procedure rules. It is the Constitution. Once you understand the Constitution, that is when you will now know the legislations. Because if you go to Article 50 on fair hearing and the rights of arrested persons, basically you will go to the criminal procedure rules. And if it is Article 22, it is the civil procedure rules and the Mutunga rules. So if you go to national values and principles of good governance in Article 10, vis-a-vis Article 201, it's the same thing.
We'll ventilate that further, and even with the help of our councils here. But just to bring in Naisula, who's still en route back to Nairobi, and so she just made a stopover just for this conversation. Asante sana for joining us. Former colleague within the profession of journalism, but now has been within the leadership structure, has been an MP at Samburu West, and also nominated as, and has really stood for the rights of the marginalized community, and that is Samburu, and very consistent in that. Thank you for joining us. In your view, 14 years on, have we realized what the Constitution set out to give the country from your perspective?
All right, thank you very much, Mark Masai. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you also to Alan Namu. As you've said, you are my colleagues in the other profession, and now I'm on this other side of being asked the tough questions. But thank you so much for putting this town hall meeting together so that we can reflect and discuss where we are as a country 14 years down the line as we implement the Constitution. I keep saying that the Constitution is a document. It is, as the other panelists have said, it is something that is living. It is alive. And so as we implement it, we will definitely then realize some aspects and some areas that we would say that, okay, maybe those who conceptualized or who thought about it did not see it in this perspective. But as we implement the Constitution now, we're seeing that maybe, this issue or that needed to be corrected. And that is why sometimes you hear people making propositions that we need to do ABCD, we need to change this. That is why you saw there was the whole aspect of BBI, there's now NADCO, and really as a progressive country, I believe that there's really nothing wrong in that. It is just that as those conversations happen across the country, in no way should it be a way of negating the strides and also negating some of the good things that the Constitution has given unto us. You have said that, and I like also what someone in the panel had said, that the Constitution, really the power belongs to the people. And some of us just hold it in trust and as delegated by the people who elect us or who get us then to the spaces of leadership. But the real power belongs to the people of Kenya. Having said that, you have mentioned that I have been consistent on issues to do with the minorities and the marginalized. And the truth of the matter is, and we have to give it to those who really conceptualized and those who worked tirelessly to give us a new constitution 14 years ago, everything that is in our constitution was well thought, it was canvassed, it was deliberated on, and that is why sometimes it is very unfortunate when I see people talk about some issues like it's something, at the periphery, or it is something that, is just there, while it is enshrined in our constitution. The other thing that I find unfortunate is when we implement our constitution selectively. What suits those of us in leadership at a particular time, we think this is what we need to implement, and what we don't want to implement, we don't. I don't want to be someone who laments. I will say some of the things that are working and what we need to look at, even as those of us who are in leadership. And what I say about selectively, it's the same way we read sometimes the Bible, where I read a certain chapter or verse to suit what I want to say at that particular time, and even just leave it at that exact verse. But probably if you just read to the next verse or the other, it will give you another perspective. And so, for example, on matters to do, before I get into the minorities and marginalized, where I'll delve in, on it just a little bit longer, but for example, an issue of the 2/3 gender rule, where we're saying for us, anyone, who will be in the appointive spaces or the elective spaces, we should not have more than 2/3 of one gender in that space. It is expressly in our constitution. If anything, the courts in the last term actually dismissed the entire parliament and said, until you get this right, because also what the constitution does, it gives us the general view or the principles. But then us in parliament, what then happens is that it is us who then put the legislations in place to breathe life then to the constitution. And so as a house, and as Parliament, because I was there from the time we were in the Senate, we've been grappling with this issue of the 2/3 gender rule with last term and even this term. And what has happened is that we have come up with bills, we have deliberated so that, I heard Alan telling one of the panelists that, you know what, you are already in that space. Why are you not doing what needs to be done? Let me tell you, on this two-third gender rule, we've been on this journey for a while. And it is unfortunate that even in the appointive positions, we find that in almost all positions, we get the bare minimum as the women. And this is not a woman issue, it is a gender issue. One day we'll find ourselves where it is the men who need to get to the two-third. And so as a country, I think we should not be looking at this issue as a male versus female or women versus men. But okay, that is just one of the issues. But very quickly on the minorities and marginalized groups.
Mheshimiwa Lasuda, I just want to jump in. Before you continue on the minorities issue, because you touched on something with regard to two-thirds, the two-thirds rule, but also in terms of the authority that legislators have in terms of choosing appointments, etc. So I want to ask a very pointed question. You were part of the parliamentary committee that was charged with the selection of our current crop of cabinet secretaries. On both fronts, on the two-thirds majority rule, but also with respect to Chapter 6 of the Constitution, do you, as Naisula Lesuda, feel like those tenets of the Constitution are being read selectively like the Bible, or were they fully expressed as should have been?
All right. So when you look at, and I said that is when we do the two-thirds, what happens, especially in the appointive, and of course us who then oversight, we get the bare minimum, you know, the one-third, just to make sure that we cross the line. Of course, we would have hoped that then we cross the line, you know, with more. And that is why even when the appointments were made, we were at the one-third, just at the basic, you know. We would hope that in future, then that is taken care of. On the issue of Chapter 6, yes, we interrogated all the nominees on those matters. And you see, when you talk about the issues of Chapter 6, the same Constitution also gives us the Bill of Rights, where also someone has a right to defend themselves. They have a right to say that, you know what, there's this case, it is ongoing. I am innocent until proven guilty. If I am proven guilty, I will vacate the office. You know, so the same Constitution, one could say, yes, we read it selectively because we looked at one. I would also say, if you look only at Chapter 6, then you're also looking at it selectively. There is also the Bill of Rights still in the same Constitution. And we interrogated. Personally, if you watched, I interrogated extensively on the nominees who had the issues of Chapter 6. And at the end of it, because I think it was Honorable Oparanya, who we had an issue, a matter that it was, but he later said it is not active in court. And he said, in case he defended himself. And he said, if he's found guilty, then he will vacate office. He later again went ahead to say, I've never written a statement and all that. You know, as a legislature, I do not have the powers to actually prove whether he wrote a statement or not. I would have expected the EACC then to say, we interrogated him or not. I would have expected all the offices that then have been put in place by our Constitution to say that as the DPP, this is how far we have also gone. So that is my position on the same.
Yeah, please, Senator Siga has something to say. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, Muhesh. Thanks for that contribution.
Hi.
One thing that the Cabinet Secretary nomination and what we saw failed to do completely is disability inclusion. And that is in Article 34(2) of the Constitution, whereby it says the principle of at least 5% of all elective and appointive bodies shall have persons with disabilities in them. And in this cabinet, there were none. And unfortunately, I did not see any of the panelists, including the chair, question the same, and which was a shame for me because Kenya has never had in its history, not even just the Constitution that we're talking about today, in its history, we have never had a cabinet secretary with a disability. And so it obviously goes to show why disability inclusion is very, very far behind. And I wish that that was spoken about or spoken up for. Second, I also had an issue with the cabinet secretary's this is not specifically to Muhesh, by the way. I'm just saying generally. On this, the last few questions after the meat and bones of the interview or the questioning happens. In the end, it says, just about where we want to ask you some mundane questions, says the chair of the committee. Number one, have you ever been adversely mentioned in any report? Yes or no? What is your net worth? Can you explain where you get them from? I don't think those are mundane. I think those go to the heart of Chapter 6, integrity, and also the chapters that we've just been talking about. Those should have been at the top, I believe, of every interview. And actually, that's where, like Mheshimiwa said, she didn't even have the chance to go and fact check, because if someone says they haven't, then, I mean, you just take it for face value because you're in there and it's a mundane question, has to be finished chap because we're at the end of the interview. And so that surely then puts a huge red mark or red question mark on this whole process. How do we actually do it? Why do we need to finish it within one sitting? Why can't we take extra care in such a huge task and say, okay, we're not sure about this, we're gonna go and fact check, and then we're going to come back. I mean, that's the kind of power that Parliament can have, but I guess we're not, like like he has said, we don't know that sovereign power belongs to us. The people also are in Parliament. We also are in Parliament too. True. And so the sovereign power also belongs to us.
In line with sovereign power, should I move a motion to rename that committee that was nominating CSS to the Committee of Bare Minimums?
No, it wasn't even the bare minimum, though.
There you go. I think, thanks. I think, without bringing Muhesh, what didn't happen in that is vetting. There's actually no vetting that goes on in Parliament. The vetting envisaged by the Constitution did not happen in Parliament, and there is zero chance of vetting happening in the current Parliament or the Parliament before the current Parliament. And I think one of the biggest issues with our constitutional implementation right now is the complete dereliction of duty by our Parliament. It essentially doesn't exist. Parliament exists only in name, and it doesn't require anybody. Parliament is closed with so much powers. You cannot believe the powers of Parliament. Parliament can fire the president. Gen Z don't have to go to the streets. Nobody has to have their car banned. The president can be fired by Parliament tomorrow without anybody spilling anything. Parliament will not do it. In fact, it's more likely if the president said tomorrow, dissolve Parliament, the current crop of parliamentarians will vote for that. It took one afternoon for former President Moi to introduce Section 2A. I never imagined that we would have a situation where Parliament will be this toothless, or this. Parliament is a sin of crime, if you ask me.
Wow, but we cannot generalize. We can't keep generalizing parliamentarians.
She just wants to respond to that, and then I'll give you a chance.
Please.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Naisula.
My good friend, Honorable Abdi Kadri, you've been a parliamentarian as well, and I must say you're one who has had a long and good standing in Parliament. I have a little challenge and problem with the generalization in Parliament when we have to keep saying Parliament, parliamentarians, politicians, because why? We have very serious parliamentarians who are doing their job, who are trying to do their best to ensure that we follow the rule of law. You can go to the Hansard, you can see what they have said in Parliament, you can see what they're championing and fighting for in Parliament. They could be the minority in Parliament, but the consistent blanket, blanket coverage of the members of Parliament covers up for the few who actually stand for something in this country. And so we continue to give so much platform to those who are not doing their job, probably those who are not, who have delegated also their powers to other offices or to other individuals in the executive, while not also giving the spaces to those who are championing for the Constitution and the rule of law. Because then what happens is that then we continue with this blanket condemnation of Parliament, and it then, we do not give credit where probably it deserves. So, Mheshimiwa Abdikadir, with due respect, You have been there yourself. I don't think you would be very happy if somebody or I said that even you, when you are in Parliament, you were not able to do your work, because I know the kind of work you did as the chairperson, I think, of CIOC. I know the work
I don't
that you
think
put
anyone
in
is saying that
to
no one's
ensure-
doing work in Parliament, Senator. I don't think that's what we're
That's
saying.
what I hear.
But I think what
That
we're
is what I've
saying
heard.
is, as a body, Parliament is failing Kenyans. And you are an individual member, yes, but you are also a member of a body. And I think
But
it
I
is
vote individually
disrespectful
in
not
Parliament.
to
I vote
accept the
individually.
feedback. You can disagree with the feedback, but I think the feedback is, as a body, Parliament is failing Kenyans. And I do want to correct you on cabinet, because first of all, you did not meet the bare minimum on the 2/3 gender rule. And the 2/3 gender rule is actually a restriction on dominance. It's not a bare minimum. So it's not a 1/3. It is, you cannot have more than 2/3. And over 70% of cabinet is male. So you didn't even meet that. So again, Parliament is failing. In terms of vetting, as Abdikadir has said, there was a case, I actually was the petitioner in that case in 2015, where we sued Uhuru Kenyatta for violation of the 2/3 gender rule, and we sued the president and Parliament. And in that case, the court laid out the process that Parliament is supposed to, the National Assembly, that the National Assembly is supposed to use in vetting cabinet nominees. And Parliament, again, has failed to do that. So I think it's disingenuous for people to come on and tell us we really need to notice the 2 or 3 good things that are happening when we're consistently saying we're going to court, we're getting these judgments, we are asking you outside in terms of public participation, in terms of this is what the legislation says. And consistently people come with, we're doing our best, we're doing our best. Well, you know what, maybe you leave. Right? Give somebody else a chance to do their best, because your best is actually not good enough for Kenyans. And that's something that parliamentarians really must accept.
Wait, devil's advocate here for a moment, because I think perhaps Senator Sige and Naisula might agree that your best sometimes can truly be the best, but when you're working against a tide of ineptitude, a tide of inadequacy, then your best doesn't get noticed. Then your best doesn't do what it's supposed to. So I don't know whether I'm speaking out of turn.
That's
You're
why
both
we
here.
need to dissolve.
Okay.
That's why we need to dissolve Parliament. Because when we're saying that we have an institution that is unable to act, because it has, as she has admitted, as Senator Lasuda has admitted, only a minority of the members are actively engaged in trying to defend, uphold, and protect the Constitution. Why on earth do we need to maintain this institution?
Okay. Naisula, you have the last word. I know you're on the road to Nyahururu.
Yeah.
So
Please allow me, yes, I'm
Yes.
just from the constituency and I'm coming back, and I just stopped to say this. So on the issue of the minorities and the marginalized groups, the Constitution envisaged this very clearly, and it gave various rights of representation, it gave rights of special opportunities, and we've made some strides, and we are yet to make more strides. For example, I'm a beneficiary of this article in the Constitution when I was nominated in the Senate. My case in point, I mean, it is used in our courts and even in the rulings, because IEBC actually really took a part in this article and chapter in our Constitution. I was number 5 in the list of TNA in the nomination, and 4 senators were to be nominated because interrogated that list. And they said out of the 4 nominees who had qualified to be nominated, 2 were from the same community, the same area, and the same region. And while our Constitution gives space to the minorities and the marginalized to be nominated, and that is why they left out 1 member, and being number 5, then I was nominated. And my good friend now, we went to court, and she said, no, I was number 3, I think, or 4 on the list. I need to be the one to be nominated. And I remember the chair then, Isaac Hassan, came to court personally to defend this article of our Constitution. And he said yes, yes, yes to every other article of the laws and the regulations. But at the end of his interrogation at the court, he said, yes, all the laws are right, but the Constitution is supreme. And the Constitution talks about the opportunities that are there for the marginalized and the minorities in this country. And that is how we won the case in at the High Court and then also at the Court of Appeal. Later, my good friend Lydia Mathia then came and told me, by then, Naisula, you're now a second-term elected member of Parliament of Samburu West. If you were not given that opportunity at the Senate, I don't think we would have had the opportunity to be seeing the kind of work that you do for your community and be elected at a within a very patriarchal community. And so I just wanted to share my own experience to say that we're not fully there, but at least as a country, we're making some strides on that. We have the issue of the Equalization Fund, which was expressly put in the Constitution, where it says under Article 204, 0.5% of all revenue collected by the national government each year calculated on the basis of most recent audited revenue received, that money will go into the fund. As a country, we have operationalized, we have the law in place. Unfortunately, we have arrears of up to 49 billion to the 14 counties that were envisaged by our Constitution, because the money of equalization was to uplift the minorities and marginalized counties, which were marginalized by sessional paper 2, as it has been said by Honorable Abdikader, to make them come to par with the other parts of the country. So we still have the funds which have not been, have not gone to those 14 counties. Before even the 49 billion of that money has gone to the 14 counties, as a Parliament and also having the Commission of Revenue Allocation, they have already brought another formula to Parliament, which says, and unfortunately, the minority again in Parliament, the majority had their way. We had our say. Last time I said we cannot have that formula, which takes the power from the 14 counties. Now we're giving money to wards. So a county which was not among the 14 is now saying, even us within our county, we have some ward which is marginalized, surely. While the Constitution talked about 14 counties, and it had a reason why it looked at those 14 counties. And so I just want to say very quickly that the equalization formula that was passed in Parliament and the one that we're going to use to divide the money is unfortunate, because equalization funds were to bring us to at par with the rest of the other counties. And that means it needs major or mega projects in those 14 counties. But now we are getting very little money, 20 million per ward.
I think she's making our point that Parliament is frustrating her too.
I think I agree with you here.
I'll leave it at that.
Yes,
okay,
I think
so
we're
if I'm running out of time, one of the reasons I'm coming back to Nairobi is tomorrow we have a very important meeting with the Commission on Revenue Allocation, where we're doing the fourth formula of the shareable revenue to counties. And the Constitution again talks about fairness at the article on the Bill of Rights to ensure people have water, they have access to education, access, the Bill of Rights. And so I hope that tomorrow, when we are looking at the fourth basis, where we'll be sharing our revenue between the national government and the county government, I hope that all of us who will be in that meeting will be guided by our Constitution to ensure that then the formula that we come up with will be one that has the spirit of the Constitution.
All right. Asante Naisula Lasuda, MP in Samburu West. Let's make sure you get home safely and you attend that meeting. Next time, though, be in town so that we can ask more of these questions in person. Asante sana. Mark, please.
Yes.
Asante san, and all the best.
Asante, asante. Safe travels. And just to hand it, because I'm also listening into the X space, we'll be handing it over to them. And please feel free to pop up your hand. I see one here. So when we come to our audience here, within Baraza Media Lab. I have another hand over there and another hand over there. So we have 3, please, for the technical crew to identify them and give them the mic when we get to them. But we also have an audience on X Spaces. We'll also be listening in to those who want to make contributions. As you were being devil's advocate there, talking about the best not quite appearing or seeming apparent because of the tide that they're working against, senior counsel here wanted to say something. I'm not sure if it's because he was also a member of parliament and he wanted to say, I was one of those who gave the best, but was working against the tide. But yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I think
I'm on an interview.
I think it's really very painful to see Parliament in the current situation. Parliament is the first institution in the Constitution for a good reason. The reason why Parliament is the first, my good friend said, the sovereign is the people. And the sovereign people can act through their elected representatives. First of all, maybe earlier on before I come to this point, before the Imperial British East African Company, they were African societies. And they organized themselves and they ran their societies. So please keep that in mind. I'm not saying we were some empty space. I needed to make that correction. But having said that, once then we went through this process and we have one Kenya, however that came about, then how do you get to organize? In other words, when you're stopped by a policeman or a policewoman on the streets, what gives them that authority to talk to you? When a member of parliament is making laws and saying, you must abide by these laws, where are these powers coming from? They're not God-given. God did not decide that X is going to be a member of parliament. God decided, but not in the Bible, in the Quran, that so-and-so would be. Essentially, where are these people getting these powers from? We are not a monarchy. In a monarchy, the sovereign is the monarch. We're not a monarchy. So where are government institutions? At which point did we say government institutions have these powers to tax you? They did not make the money with you. So why is KRA coming for your money? A police person might be younger than you, less strong than you, but is clothed with powers to arrest you. Where did these things come from? This is the reason why we have a constitution. Because we, the people, have said we are going to organize ourselves in this format and donate those powers so that we can run our affairs as a society. But because we know power will be abused, we have to limit power. Power corrupts. So we have to limit power through the use of the Constitution. Now, the most powerful institution under the Constitution is Parliament. Why? Because Parliament has the widest powers to oversight all institutions of government, including the executive. Let me give you an example. When we were in the 10th Parliament, the president then, the late President Mwai Kibaki, reappointed the head of the anti-corruption authority without getting Parliament to have a say, without getting the board that was oversighting that institution to have a say. Why? Because the executive thought we are just renewing the appointment. He had already been appointed, vetted, now we are renewing. And the board came to our committee and said, we have been bypassed. And we said, we'll not accept it. And we wrote to the executive and said, reverse this appointment. And the executive said, no, we have already appointed, we have gazetted the appointment, the gentleman is back in office, sorry. And we said, no. So how do you appoint by a gazette notice? That is subsidiary legislation. And all legislation belongs to Parliament. So we went to Parliament and cancelled the gazette notice. So the fellow has not been gazetted. The executive said, too bad. The fellow is in office. Are you going to come and chuck him out of the office? He said, no. Next was the budget. The next month, the finance bill was coming. So we said, okay, who votes funds for government institutions? Parliament does. So I, as the chair, move a motion to delete the entire budget of CASA. And so we have a meeting in the Speaker's office because I'm proposing an amendment to remove which means the entire institution will have no funds, which means the donors, and that time we had problems, are going to say, you are not fighting corruption, we're going to be in trouble. So the Deputy Prime Minister then, later President Kenyatta, and the Prime Minister and myself meet in the Speaker's office. What do they want to do? Withdraw that amendment. The Speaker says, I can force the Member of Parliament. You have the numbers, you can defeat him on the floor. I know Parliament will support me. What do they have to do? The President has to reverse. And the appointment did not go through. Now, Parliament, that was the 10th Parliament before the Constitution was amended. This one has far much wider powers. So I disagree with my sister, Lesula. Probably one senator or two or three, maybe one or two MPs, but a majority of our parliamentarians have abdicated.
Sorry to jump in. I mean, this point has been made, I think, around this entire baraza, and I believe a number of people here agree with it, and the people on X Spaces. And Maura, I just want to bring you in, and Maura and Mike, because that failure has also been acknowledged by the members of the public who went to the streets, protested, even took the mace away from Parliament. And that was an important symbolic gesture, right? But I think the crossroads was the crossroads that they found themselves at was, okay, we have denied Parliament this power, right? And the people may, right? And the people shall exercise power directly or indirectly. How does direct exercise of power happen in a situation where Parliament has been denied of its authority, or of its authority to be able to do that? I think that's a question that's sitting in the people's minds.
So I think the people are not innocent.
Mm-hmm.
The people are not innocent
I'm hearing some interesting responses to that statement.
Yes.
Yes.
You see, who elects members of Parliament?
Mm-hmm.
The people elect members of Parliament.
True.
And since the Katiba, the most hopeful time for me was during the initial period of the Gen Z demos.
Mm.
Because for the first time, we have a young, vibrant setup of Kenyans who are engaged. Now, our political process is totally corrupt. Not just money corruption, but we elect people based on ethnicity. Mm-hmm. Now, if I elect you because you come from community X, you never leave community X. You are born into community X. So if the reason why I elected you was you come from community X, you will never fail that criteria. Mm. Why? Because you'll never leave that community. So if I elected you because you come from my community, I cannot hold you to account. You are still from the community. Mm. And who elects? The people elect. Now, the real question for Gen Z is, what are you going to do with your numbers? If you are going to go and demonstrate and some people then infiltrate your demonstration and burn our cars, you are failing us. If you use your numbers to elect right people to Parliament so that Parliament can do, or you go to leadership yourselves and lead this country, that is what Kenya is hoping for. Mm-hmm. Now we're on a slippery slope. Kenya is not interested in going to chaos. We don't want to go to Sudan. But we want to live the ideals of the Constitution. And our young people are our hope. So the hope is that the people directly elect. That is how they exercise. Mm. You can also remove your members of Parliament, by the way, but that is a process that requires the IEBC, and there are some issues I'll probably say about the IEBC. But my prayer, a year, 2 years is not too far. There are some who are very impatient, and young people are impatient. But if I was to send one message, 2 years is a very short time to organize. What the young people of this country need to do, zero leadership is not an answer. We are leaderless is irresponsible. Political power is gained through a political process. Political processes require political structures and leadership. You cannot say we are leaderless and we want to change. That will not bring change. You have to have the structures to implement the change you want. And
Well,
you need to organize. Sorry.
But to be fair, they have brought change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's that you can, I think it's possible. I would say something different. I would say that there is an opportunity to chart new paths, and the fact that many of us have understood politics in a particular way, have played by the rules, fair or unfair as they may be, does not mean that current and future generations must always do it that way. And I really feel like if there's one thing that I really don't like calling them Gen Z as in sort of these young people, because I feel like it's a zeitgeist, it's a moment, right? It's not just young people. So first of all, by all means, remain leaderless as long as possible, right? But number two, there are other processes by which you can remove parliament, and there is dissolution. And I keep hopping back on dissolution because dissolution is a constitutional remedy, right? It is not anarchy. I think I've said before that the real architects of anarchy are the legislature and the executive, because they're the ones who are constantly coloring outside constitutional lines, right? So the anarchy argument, we really need to keep throwing it right back at their faces. You know, Honorable Lesuda, I don't want to call her honorable, not because she's not honorable, but Representative Lesuda, because I think we really need to move away from this honorable language, right? Representative Lesuda told us herself that that the National Assembly failed in the cabinet nominee process, right? So basically what we're saying is, as a whole country, those of us in parliament, those of us outside of parliament, have said parliament is failing. Why are we so invested in maintaining an institution that has abdicated responsibility, that is constitutionally subject to dissolution, and continues to fail doing its job? Like, I feel like there's a problem that we have with and maybe we need to call ourselves to a small meeting you may attend. Like, what is our problem? Do we feel like we're not going to be okay without parliament? Like, why are we having a problem? Or is it that it's the gender rule that's going to be the basis for dissolution?
So just to put it into context, based on what you're talking about, dissolution of parliament, it's not just now based on what has been said to be the failure of parliament, whether in the vetting process, but you've said earlier and on a different platform that, bring it back a bit, and 7 years back, we should have had them dissolved.
That Parliament has been subject to dissolution for failure to enact fifth schedule legislation for a very long period of time, right? And I constantly quote the gender rule because that's the one we've litigated up to the point of dissolution. But they've actually failed to pass legislation on other marginalized groups, including young people, right? So it's just that no one has litigated that the way we've litigated the gender rule, right? And what I keep trying to tell people is the existence of parliament from that period when they should have been dissolved to now is what is emboldening them to continue to commit illegalities. Because nothing happens to them. They have no consequences.
But on that issue that we've looked at over the years, gender aspect, there was some thoughts that you shared with us earlier when we were just chatting, Bwana Michael, in terms of representation. You feel, correct me if I'm wrong, that it has been taken care of under this new constitution, and that is with the representation of 47 women representatives. But you could rehash that and tell us why you are of the view that the constitution has sorted that in many ways.
To me, personally, the constitution had sorted that one out. And that is why in the whole republic, it is only the women who have got 47 representatives, not the males. Because when you talk of two-gender rule, already they are scoring 100 out of 100.
Your math is flawed.
No, that's not right.
No.
That's not right.
Let him prosecute his point and then you can respond.
Just give me that space so that I can explain it. Like, we have 47 counties in the republic, right? And the main question was representation. Huh? Was it not representation? When you talk of two-thirds gender, it was about representation. And representation, already we have 47 women reps, right? Was it on appointment? That is the school of reasoning I have with that. Was it appointment or representation?
Well, there's
the reason as to why I'm saying
aides.
so, it is because if you look at the role of Parliament, it is oral, right? It is oversight, representation, appropriation, and legislation. The issue women have been having in this republic is about the legislative aspect part of it.
No, the issue that women have, and women are here so women can speak for ourselves, is that we are equal participants in this society. So you don't get to tell us what our area of interest is in Parliament. We're interested in all of it. We're interested in all of the executive, we're interested in all of Parliament, we're interested in all of the judiciary.
Like my sister, if you are saying that it is in the all interest, right? Maybe the executive wing, even the judiciary, like I want to take you through judiciary. There is a complaint from the males that judiciary is female dominated. Chief Justice is a woman, right? The registrar, she's a woman. Deputy Chief Justice is a woman. If you look at the composition of the persons who are sitting at the Judicial Service Commission, women are topping the males. How many males do we have in the commission?
You need
How
to go
many
to
men? How many men do we have?
Let me allow Senator to let me allow Senator
Yeah.
to respond as well, and then we'll jump in with Maura and then senior counsel.
And then also the audience.
Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I think the whole 47 counties have 47 women reps is a mischaracterization of equity within the government or across the country. First of all, remember that we as women are more in the population than men. We're about 51% of the population, represented by only 47 women. That's what you're saying is enough. So around 25 or odd million people should be represented only by 47. We should be satisfied by that. No. Secondly, if you count the number of people in National Assembly and the Senate, in the Senate there's 67, including the Speaker, 68. National Assembly, 349, including the Speaker, 350. Out of that, in the Senate, we do not have 2/3. And in the National Assembly, it's even lower. They have 55 more women to go to top up to become gender compliant, right? So when you say the 47, that is a mischaracterization, and you're completely missing out on the fact of the whole number, which is a simple maths. And then second of all, as has been said, we're not just talking about women issues, because women are in every single aspect of this and facet of this country, right? Whether it is name it, basically. I don't even want to go through the list. So when you say that we should be satisfied as 47, that I think is really misinformed and a little bit. It's like you're giving out misinformation to those who are listening. And I feel like sitting here, we are responsible to be giving correct information and information that will actually build this conversation to a place where we're talking about equity. Not you should be satisfied. This you just kakando. Umeshapatiwa, imagine, relax. You have a CJ who is a woman. Isn't that enough? Well, no. The president, the vice president, the prime cabinet secretary. How many cabinet secretaries? How many members of parliament? How many MCAs? How many governors? You know what I'm saying? We can go down the entire list and you'll see, even down to chiefs of villages, how many are women? You see? So that's it's not just about the 47 who are and also, when you talk about the 47, how much powers do they have in parliament? They have an MP, a Laisuda, and Mheshimiwa, let me call her that because I want to be respectful. She has around 200 million to play with as an elected MP. A woman rep, Mheshimiwa Esther Pastaris, only has about 8 million for her county. So tell me, a constituency MP who has 200 million to play budget for development and so on and so forth, versus a woman rep who only has 8 million for the entire now county.
Mr.
So
Moro,
it's those
in
kinds
his
of
capacity,
things. And
from
also,
LS,
I really hope that we don't disintegrate into like a gender war conversation.
No, it's
Because
not.
we're talking about the Constitution.
No.
Yeah.
We need to come back and like focus back in on the Constitution.
I think Maura wants to step in from LSK's perspective on this.
Yes.
Moving forward.
First and foremost, Michael, lawyers are not afraid of judges. I mean, it's a complete misnomer that you would assume that we may be afraid of judges. It is not correct. Maybe shall.
You shall be afraid.
The relationship that exists between lawyers and judges is that first and foremost, judicial officers are members of the Law Society. That is a fact. And when you retire from the bench, in fact, you just come back to the bar. And so your point on that is wrong. I am making an emphasis that even as Kenyans, let us strive for stronger institutions. When you see the representative making an effort to convince you that they are actually doing something, in fact, they are not doing anything. Because a sale of point, a good salesperson takes a shorter time to convince you to buy. When you take long to convince me to buy, you know, in traffic, the guys who sell the CDs or the guys who do the acrobats, they take a very short time to convince you that my art or my trade actually suits you, isn't it? And that is why, even as a Muslim, you will buy gospel music from a sect that is not yours, or vice versa. So what I'm trying to make an emphasis, especially now on this gender debate, is that we must strive to see a formula that works for all. Because in a near future, the tides may change. And because the constitutional affirmative action is on one gender, and true to the fact, me, I believe in two genders. I'm not of that school of thought, because if you extend it, then you'll have a problem, even in terms of the constitutional interpretation. Because then you'll have another third, fourth, fifth, sixth, which can't be represented, or rather we'll have a constitutional quagmire. But when you have a formula that then becomes so equitable, you can be able even to forecast and say, for instance, why isn't there any clamor in terms of national defense, parameters in terms of the compliance on this Article 27 criteria? I can say it with my heart and chest that probably women, or rather the majority of women in that sector or outside that sector, may not find interest in it. And those who are there are structurally disenfranchised. The criteria, the structures there are deliberately put to disenfranchise women from ever ascending to the echelons of power that are within that sector. But now look at a sector like justice, CJ, DCJ, AG, President of the Law Society of Kenya, Auditor General. I mean, I'm not saying that that is bad. No. In fact, in my own estimation, justice is female. Justice is female. Women have a different sense of looking at equity, of looking at what is just in a society. So if, for instance, what the representative was saying is right, can we have a monitoring and evaluation criteria, and it will shock you on what is constitutionally permissible on what comes out of the two houses? I can give you the data on that. It is approximately 65% of what comes out of Parliament is usually declared unconstitutional. Didn't we have a moment in time, probably like 3 or 4 months ago, where the High Court declares the section on housing levy unconstitutional, and in 3 weeks, we have a legislation on the same thing. The court says this is unconstitutional. Parliament says, hold my beer. They go back and do the exact same thing that, didn't we have a moment where the court said, chief administrative secretaries are unconstitutional?
Yeah.
Don't we have a prime chief, what do you call it? Prime cabinet chief, and,
yes,
and offices which are unconstitutional. And the president can go on live media and say, Wakenya nimeondoa hizo ofisi. But it's illegal, umeondoa illegality. So you see, from the, let's have an experiment. The Constitution at Article 115 says, there is a lawmaking process in the National Assembly as well as the Senate. The process is so straightforward that I agree with the sentiments that Senior is saying. The strongest institution, in fact, is Parliament. So Parliament tells the President, under 115.6, we have returned to you the piece of legislation. Please assent to it. The President says, I am giving you feedback. His feedback says, I have cancelled the entire bill. Constitutional defilement cannot have a better description, because Parliament, all those members of Parliament, in fact, are voices of the people, isn't it? And the people will not be wrong that one person will be right.
Maura.
So you see, as we continue even with the debate, John, and I'm finalizing, because I like following the discussions rather passively when I'm listening. We must insist on strong institutions. That is the only way out, that if we have a parliament where the value system is on the kind of money you have, you can buy your way into party nominations, you can buy your way into Parliament, to the National Assembly. And one proposal, Senior, and I hope you'll address this as you conclude. Why not try and challenge the term of Parliament vis-a-vis the term of the presidency? Switch it. Make each life independent. You will see the outcome. You will see the outcome.
True.
Amendment of the Constitution.
All right, guys. I want us to take a brief breather from this conversation here. There are a number of people who've been listening. Obviously, there's members of the audience who now would be your time to shine. Put up your hands and ask your questions, make your comments. But on X, the conversation's also being followed, and I think the first speaker is Muthoni Drama Queen. Can you hear us? And if you can, you can ask your question, make your comment. Oh, wait 1 second.
Muthoni,
first
Muthoni
to
Drama Queen.
Muthoni. I was like, wow, man.
Drama King.
Muthoni, you are deep. All right, can we hear Muthoni on X? Guys in the back, can we hear Muthoni? All right, 1 second as we give a bit of time.
Yeah.
You can ask your question.
The Constitution, but my challenge to the advocates is it's good that we are in the midst of the advocates, and they are the biggest challenge when we are fighting for this Constitution. They are all over the place, giving us challenges. They are the people who the president has elected as CS, the majority of them, because he's very cunning and he knows that he can take advantage because they know where to press. Also, number two is if we can introduce the Constitution as a topic in schools, let's say primary schools and secondary schools. Thank you.
All right, many thanks, many
There's
thanks.
more of a comment. I think there was a hand back there. If you could just hand it.
All right.
Yeah.
I've been ready to speak up the whole time. My name is Nyambura, and I make content. I'm a content creator. I love books. That's my thing. My question initially was for Michael, but now it's for everyone, which is how do we, as regular citizens, and I speak especially as a person who's not a man, so it means that, for instance, when you go to public participation meetings, people are not looking to hear young people. They're not looking to hear women. If you're a young woman, pole kwako, like sit at the back. I know this because I've gone to ward meetings, I've gone to constituency meetings and so on. Clearly, very active citizen, etc. So how do we ensure constitutionalism in our communities, like on a local level? Because Kenyans have been going around showing how, for instance, their money has been spent on nothing. Like there are no roads to speak of, there are no school buildings to speak of, etc. How do we ensure that stuff? Like Michael talks about PIL, public interest litigation, for the people in the chat who are like, what is PIL? What is PIL? It's an orange pill. It's public interest litigation. PIL is one way, but how many of us have the means to engage in PIL? You know what I'm saying? How many of us have the time? Some of us have to hold down jobs. So we don't have the time or the resources and all of that stuff. So how do we ensure constitutionalism on a local level, with our MCAs, with our MPs, with the people who we are interacting with on a regular basis? That's my question. You don't have to answer it now, Michael, but just marinate. Thank you.
And just to prompt the people on X that they could also ask for the mic, and our team, the technical team that is controlling that, can hand it to you, and then we'll probably interrupt the question or the response to her question, because she's leveled it to everyone on the panel. But please do, and Senior Counsel.
Thank you. First of all, on the 47, if I was to respond, the fact that we are focusing on the 1 or 2 offices held by women shows that we have failed in that principle. I mean, the reason why they are standing out is because it's so rare to have 1 or 2. if the CJ and the deputy, in fact, generally the CJ, deputy, registrar, all would be men and nobody would notice. So the 47, how did it come about? The Senate was new. The county assemblies were new. It was possible to structure them constitutionally. The National Assembly was already existing. The interests were vested. The constituencies were geographical. So it would be very difficult to say Nyeri North or constituency X, you must elect only a woman. It was easy. Now, it's very difficult to get women elected for cultural, structural problems, resources, a lot of things. So we need to help that constitutionally. That's why we have the gender rule. It's male or female, but right now it's the female that has the requirement for support. So how do we do it? That is what we're grappling with. And the 47 was okay. We get about 17% elected, or 9%, or 21 women usually, or thereabouts. Can we add 47, have county constituencies? That at least gives a little bit of boost. Then what happens with the balance? Then can we get a method that is agreeable to deliver? It would have been nice if we were able to negotiate that and agree as part of the constitutional process. It was very difficult. That was one of the difficult issues. The other difficult issue was the number of counties. If you realize, we all agree they are too many and too small. And the hope was if we could have the 8 regions or the 7 regions, again, it was not possible because you had to get consensus on every item. Otherwise, it's difficult. So I absolutely agree that it's a failure, and all these red herrings about costs, about women, those are all excuses.
Okay.
That's an absolute necessity. In terms of how do you engage? Eternal vigilance. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We get to elect these people. Let us not look for difficult solutions. I think let's dissolve and throw out and kick them out. It's a possibility, but that's a difficult solution. You get, in 2 years' time, we have the opportunity to clean house, 100%. And they will pay for it. The government will pay for that process. Right now, if you want to go through your processes, you will pay for them, and I have no problem with members of parliament being kicked out. That's number one. Number two, in any event, Kenyans kick out 80% of members of parliament every election cycle. It's only that you bring in worse crop than the crop that was there. So please, let us organize. Politics is about organizing. Let us organize. Let us engage. Let us use the courts, but parliament has shown that they can tell the court to go to hell because there's a court decision that says parliament is illegal without the gender rule being implemented. Isn't it there? It has not expired. It is there. It's a Supreme Court. There you go. That's the decision of the Supreme Court because the Constitution says if there are constitutional issues, seek an advisory from the Supreme Court. So what I would suggest, and of course there will be better ideas, but if you are to ask me, we have 2 years to organize until the next elections. Let us see how many young people will be on that ballot and how many young people will vote for those. By the way, if all the young women elected women as their representatives, you will not need the gender rule. But we know that will not happen because of the structures of our politics. What we need to change, our laws are good. Our politics is corrupt. That is where we need to address.
Okay.
There was a High Court decision that stayed curiously and awkwardly the decision of the Supreme Court on that particular issue. I know it is awkward.
Yeah.
But then on what he said, the Law Society has a weird membership, and even as we clamor for the rule of law, we find ourselves sometimes with challenges in terms of the effectiveness of our statutory mandate. We really try, and in fact on CAS1 and CAS2, as well as CAS3, it is the Law Society that was the petitioner, even though our own members were beneficiaries of those appointments. And even in CS appointments, we usually raise challenges in terms of public participation, in terms of ambassadorial positions. We raise And I've just explained, even sometimes we face challenges, for instance, and I'll say this on record, I mean, I'm not siuziwi uoga. The government has ways to deal with institutions like the Law Society. We receive from time to time agency demands from the Kenya Revenue Authority. What I'm trying to say may seem light at the head, but for institutions like ours that have membership contributions and not assistance from government, such agency demands, in fact, are a position of caution. Like the government is telling you, we are not given platforms on the KRA filing system. We have challenges in terms of ourselves being profiled by security, agents in the country, and these are live instances. So even as you perhaps pretend to say that lawyers are the, and I mean, you have the right to express that there are so many things at play that you may not have, appreciated. Although, as you try to configure yourself into that arena, you'll see that there's a lot of sacrifice that comes from the Law Society, especially in matters of rule of law, in matters of constitutionalism, and sometimes it borders even on the individual lives of advocates.
Maura did say if you take too long to explain something, not too long ago. But I believe there's someone who's ready to speak on X.
So on X. Okay, so there are a number of comments and questions here, but let's start with the guys who are online. There's I believe Moses Mulwa, who's got a microphone on our X space. Moses, if you can make yourself heard, we are ready to hear your question or brief comment.
Okay, I am going to comment on the issue of women representation, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. I would like to take you back a bit on the issue of women representation.
Do you hear him?
When you go back in during the Moi government, you can see we had the likes of Kinawangari Maathai.
Oh, you can hear him. Okay, so Mark's listening and translating.
Yes, we had the live.
So as Mark's listening, let's go to the comments from the audience. Where now? The moderator shall select the person right in front of him, and will move in this direction. Let's start with you, and then we go back there in that way. And so as panelists, we'll all listen in, and then now we can make our final comments as we close, hopefully one more time with X. Please state your name, ask your question.
Hi everyone.
Okay, my question is very simple regarding women representation in the parliament. For example, right now we have in every county we have women representatives who are currently represented in the National Assembly. But at the end of the day, you find that some bills are passed that are punitive to the women of Kenya.
How do we practically make sure that when they come in, they're not the same as this current crop that we have, that they won't fail us, that collectively they'll be advocating for the interests of the people?
It's a good question. I believe one that, anyway, let me not inject my beliefs here. You can just pass the mic behind you.
Is the mic working?
I believe so. You can try another microphone though.
Oh, it's working online. Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
Then. Hi everyone, my name is Washera. So one is a comment about what Senior Counsel has said multiple times, is we only have 2 more years to organize. So from reading about the protests that happened, on the Tuesday that people were able to storm Parliament, 30-odd something of the counties had protests. Meaning there has been people who have been organizing, whether it's 5, 10 years from now. You've been doing this since you were 19 years old. So I think we need to realize as Kenyans is we need to recognize that people who've been doing this work for a very long time, recognized, unrecognized, and it continues. Backing up your point about dissolving Parliament, I feel like your generation is always scared about, to dissolve and then what happens? Like, guys, we'll be fine. Because again, the Constitution creates the provisions for what happens after that.
Yeah.
But I think your fear comes from the fact that we do not uphold the rule of law because we are corrupt, even individually. That is the issue. And to also answer your question about how do we go about ensuring that when we set a precedent now that the future parliamentarians will do what they need to do, it's a matter of also us sitting down as Kenyans and asking ourselves, what are our values and what values do you want to perpetuate? You asked a question about how to, like you go to these political participation meetings and everything, public participation, sorry, yes. I'm the type of person who I say, you go with your homies, man, you roll up narende. If you're not being listened to by the older generation, if it's 5 against 1, watasema, you know, or like it's about ensuring that you're there collectively and ensuring that your voices are being heard and that you're ensuring that your presence is felt. Those are the comments that I had.
Thank you, Washera. You can pass the mic behind you. It's coming that way, so yeah, please.
Thank you
Go
for
ahead.
this opportunity. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Benjamin, and I wanted to ask 2 questions about this government in terms of trust and accountability. I think as a young person, I cannot trust this government to implement certain strategies that will better the country. So I want to ask Senator Sige, is it possible for us to sit down and try to build a trust with this government so that you can be able to move forward?
With this current government?
Not this one. Even this government, I'm not opposed to it because I think when you have that discussion, Kenya grows. When you have that discussion to sit down with these people and to find a way forward, I think Kenya grows. It's possible to have this discussion, but I think the parameters that are there currently in this country does not allow that. Yeah. So how do we build this trust with these politicians? That's my first question. My second question is about accountability. Is it possible for these members of parliament to kind of, in layman's terms, be searched after they leave power to make sure that they did not steal or did anything bad with their power? Yeah. To do that, is it possible to create a strategy like a law that can allow this thing to be done for members of parliament?
I believe so, and I don't think that we even require any additional law for that to take place, but better heads than I can answer. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, my name is James. I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I think it is extremely sad that today being the birthday of the Constitution, the government, parliament, executive, I think even the judiciary hasn't made any statement or even program to commemorate what we did 14 years ago. I think it's extremely sad. Probably, it's like when you have a child you don't want to recognize, you just forget their birthdays, and that's really sad. My question is to you, Senior Counsel. We have a quagmire that I think someone has mentioned in passing. We want to dissolve the parliament. We marched to parliament itself to actually dissolve it, physically because they had refused to take court orders. There are court orders, there are Supreme Court advices. The quagmire we have is that parliament has, I think intentionally, refused to process the IEBC selection. They have, I think I remember the chairman of the selection panel saying that they have been frustrated. The current election selection panel has been frustrated by parliament itself. And even with the new laws, we do not have a selection panel, I think a month after the assent of the bill. So the quagmire is, we do want to resolve, and we have in our minds dissolve parliament. How do we get another parliament elected, seeing as we have no IEBC? Does the current secretariat itself has sufficient mandate for the election of parliamentarians? I know for the presidency it's a whole different thing altogether, but does the current secretariat have that mandate? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Wanjiru Nguhe. Where do I stand?
Just to your left.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
My name is Wanjiru Nguhe, and I usually love to listen to the conversation about elections, where when citizens go to the streets, we are always told, you know, you need to elect. But let's consider what elections are. Let us consider that when you walk into a polling station, there are usually names that appear before you. I mean, as Kenyans, we have like an entire booklet of names that appear before you. What is the process of getting those names to appear before you? So you're telling me, who is a young person with Fuliza and Mshwari and all of these things, to make wise choices on who to vote amongst nonsense choices. Because by the time the names are appearing, we have the IEBC, we have the police, we have the political parties, we have KRA, we have Article 6 of the Constitution, which is usually treated like a child, sit there while grown-ups are speaking. So you bypass all of those institutions and all of those provisions, and then you come to me as a citizen and tell me we need you to vote wisely. What wise choices exist when the entire system is flawed? So even as we're talking about elections, I would also like us to have a conversation about elections and the entire election industrial complex, because it is an entire industrial complex. But at this moment, telling Kenyans to wait for an election, knowing how flawed they are and knowing the processes that please explain to me how you're going to vote for someone, I speak from Kiambu County, who is on a death certificate, and there is an entire grave to his name. But then I'm supposed to walk into that, I'm supposed to walk into a booth and make a wise choice. Well, he made it through all of those institutions. So I don't know whether it's a question or a comment, but it's also a suggestion that we talk about elections in this country, what it really means, and also we have demands, on Parliament, what it needs to legislate, especially with particular reference to campaign financing. Yes, thank you very much.
Great question. And to your response, to respond to you, Pengine, elections should be za kiroho in Kiambu County, but less serious. Good points. Is there one more? There's
a question here.
Oh wait, there's a comment here. A question, right? A comment. Sorry. Then we'll come back here. All right. Okay.
It's a bit chilly, yeah. But hi, my name is Raymond. I'm 19 and I'm a journalist. Hey. Yeah. You're actually my alumni. You're from USIU. Yeah?
Sorry, say again?
I'm from USIU.
Okay.
You're an ex-USIU.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No,
so
no, I thought you were saying like you're my role model and I wanted to stand up and...
No, actually, he is. He is.
This hour.
Yeah. The lecturers always say your name, but that's not the point. Yeah, right. I feel like as someone who is part of the Constitution as 14 years, the reason why you could say about the young people in terms of the leaderless thing is because we have been, in terms of it has been autonomous because we really didn't care about politics for almost from the 2000s onwards.
Yeah.
But now I can say something they can say that the government has gifted us is to show their incompetence and made Kenyans aware of what they're doing. Where we can see there's this phrase what they say, watu si wajinga sasa. Because you have people like Morara doing a good job going around, using his fuel and showing us Kenyans actually get a heart attack. Like me, heart palpitation when I see previously on Vampire Diaries. And I appreciate that people are taking the initiative to show that what is happening within the country. I'm from Kiambu also. And with the 3 people that have been leading Kiambu, it has been a mess. A big L, big one like this. So yeah, and I feel like the point of leaderless, why people say we're leaderless, is because we fear being compromised. That's the biggest issue. And I think now, because of this phrase called what was Salimiwe, it has actually helped people to be accountable. It has really, really helped us as Kenyans to make sure, because we have realized that we understand that the judiciary is an independent body, and that's what is the Constitution. But the Constitution is in the books. It's in history books, but it's not well explained. And we are taught that the judiciary is an independent body, but we're realizing that the executive is doing some cherry picking to what favors them, and they put bills that favor them as an individual, not to the people. When it comes to the people, they really don't care. And when it comes to things that going against them, the incompetence and corruption, they really know how to back, but they don't know how to bite.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I know there's a few more. Can I exercise some executive authority here? Given that you've spoken, let's give these two an opportunity. I think there's one person behind me.
Yep.
Then Mark, you can take it over. But as you're doing that, as the mic's being passed to the people from Kiambu County, and I think generally speaking, tomorrow on Africa Uncensored, we've been tracking corruption in the counties for 11 years. Nairobi, 35.7 billion shillings has been stolen in 11 years. Check out the page tomorrow and get a bit more angry at your leaders. But anyway, that was just a quick plug. So, well, the pressure is...
so John, if you'll allow me, not to overrule your executive decision, but just to involve someone from Spaces, Penseli.
Okay.
I think he has a mic, and then you'll be with it, sir. You already have the mic, so I'll give it to you. But also so that we can also take the questions that have been put forward so far, so we don't forget them. So Penseli, if you can hear me, just take it over. The mic is with you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the conversation. Yes, thank you so much for the conversation. And there's some pertinent points that have been brought up. My only question is,
okay,
will it be all talk and no...
is back in effect.
It stands. Okay.
Yeah,
so to the people on X, I know you can hear us. We can't hear you, and this is why we keep on cutting you short. Our apologies. We're going to try once more before the evening is out. But to the questions or comments back here, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay.
My name is George Kiriro. I'm a journalist, and my question is, actually, I have a statement from whatever you've said earlier on. You said about normalizations of how probably the cultures, tribes, how people normalize that sort of things. For Gen Zs, whatever we are putting across to the people of Kenya is that people should understand that those norms shouldn't be something that you carry in your day-to-day lives. And I can give a good example. While I was in a matatu some time back, I was going to work, and some people were speaking, during the Maandamano times, some people were speaking of how we are wasting our time, and we are wasting our time, and that whatever we are doing as a country or as the movements won't be of importance to us.
Keep going, keep going.
And I just looked at them, turned and looked at them, and I was like, you know, this is the idea or the mentality that we don't need. As much as you feel like it won't help, just keep it to yourself. That's what I told them. Luckily, I was alighting, so. Yeah. Yeah, so, and then the next thing is on the debt ceiling. I know it's not much based on the Constitution, but the people of Kenya is good, they know that. Ruto is targeting our GDP to reach 22%, and we are currently at 14%, if I'm not wrong. If my maths have me right, 700,000, for someone who wants 700,000, is deducted 208,000. If the GDP is to skyrocket to 22%, which is possible for him, and keeping in mind, even the mentality of people wanting him to stay into power till 32, that is something that really, really icks me at. Keeping in mind he's going to stay in power to 2032. Per se, the GDP reaches 22%. I was doing my math, if 22 is equals to 208, what about 14? It gave me around, was it 280,000? Me, as a young generation, my biggest worry is the debt ceiling might skyrocket to 20 trillion, if I'm not wrong. And for the older people who are up there, I feel like they should care for the young people. As much as they are filling their pockets, care for the young people. They are your kids, they are the future of Kenya. So I would like them to put that in mind. And then also the issue of AG. I guess this is the first time that Kenya has had an AG switched before a president has finished his term. And I was wondering, how will that affect the law society of Kenya or the laws that govern our country?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before you make your comment, I just want to read some of the comments that are coming from X. There's just two, so you can just get ready. So this was from Moses Mulua, who we had tried to listen to in here. His question was directed towards government projects that have been allocated money and have been paid, but the contractors have done little or nothing on the works. Who bears the burden of responsibility, and when are they supposed to be held responsible? I guess it's really the question of accountability that he's speaking to. And then there's a second comment from Stanley Natta, also on X. If we fail to catch the corrupt politicians in the beginning, why don't we add a constitutional amendment that binds people to their agendas, and we catch them if they finish their term without doing exactly what they promised? I believe it's similar to what the gentleman behind you, Mark, had asked with regard to tracking the promises and, actually making sure that things that are promised are implemented. But to you, and then now we can come to our comments. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Japheth Mutisia. I'm a lawyer. Basically, the sentiment around the room is that there's a lack of goodwill in government and in parliament, basically, where there are active saboteurs who are basically pushing their agenda and their personal initiatives. And I think the idea is that who pays the piper calls the tune, such that whoever is financing an election, and it speaks to what the lady here was speaking about, the campaign financing, elections financing, whoever is going to fund an election is going to determine policy, is going to determine any government initiative that is going to come into place once the government enters office. And we might have to rethink how financing happens during the campaign season. We could even put it to a threshold of an election offense when, if you spend money to a certain level, that is going to be an election offense, and you can go to court and you can challenge your elections just because you spent money that you are not supposed to spend in elections. And I think the other comment I wanted to make is with regards to the party system in Kenya. And I know this is a very contentious and emotional issue in Kenya because the establishment of a multi-party system brought a lot of reforms into the country. But you might need to think about what does it mean to have a political party in Kenya? Because it has become a situation where if you don't toe the party line, the party can easily de-whip you, and you really don't have a mind when you're inside a political party. You have to do what the party says. Basically, you have to do what the party says, and if you don't do what the party says, the party can easily de-whip you. So we need to talk about it's something I refer to as a party oligarchy, where a party decides what happens, and if the party decides, if you do what contraries to the party, you really don't have something to do in parliament. You can get removed. So my suggestion is to put a system in place where a party leader cannot be a president, and if you're a president, you have to relieve yourself of all obligations and all duties you have in your party, such that you can't influence the agenda in the party and you can't control whatever is happening in parliament. And I think in doing so, we can relieve the kind of authority the president has inside parliament, and by extension, allow parliament to have some autonomy. Thank you.
All right. Mark. So I believe that was more of a comment. So if we could, if you'll allow me to have people respond to the questions that have been leveled already, and that's around, we could start with senior counsel, and then to Marilyn, and then back to the side.
Thank you very much. I think those are very important comments and very important questions. So let me start with the young lady first. It's not that we are selling you fear. We are a little bit more experienced. African states generally are weak states. Institutions are weak, and it is very easy to go, okay, I suspect these two gentlemen, a number of us, were around in 2007 December, when we had a gentleman called Kofi Annan in town. I don't think you were born then, probably. So there you go. So I can assure you there was a day every Kenyan was praying that Annan doesn't leave town. I don't know whether you remember that feeling. Yeah. We were glued to the TV to see whether the fellow was around. Annan was a Ghanaian. He had very little to do with us. But we were at such a critical moment that this country could easily go to the dogs. And it is not fiction that countries go to the dogs. Sudan had a very hopeful, popular revolution a few months ago. Right now, every Sudanese who is able is getting the hell out of Sudan. And it is the poor people who are left to die in Sudan. So the members of parliament and all the rich people will take flights out of this city if the country bans. We don't want the country to ban. We are not saying you should not do great things to sell you fear. As I said, in 2003, and sorry I'm taking a bit long, in 2003, a man called Moi left power. And Kenyans were the most hopeful people in the world. Reported. Kenyan citizens were arresting policemen on the streets of Nairobi. Yes. And then what happened? That revolution was lost. When we promulgated the new Katiba 14 years ago, Kenyans were extremely hopeful. We have been hopeless for a long time until the Gen Z revolution. We are very hopeful. Ours is to say, please go the right direction. By all means, do the important work. And for people who want to do revolution, politics is not difficult. I mean, if you are gearing for revolution, politics is less difficult than revolution. It's very difficult, very expensive, but it's less difficult than revolution. Yesterday I was listening to former CJ Mutunga, and you asked about the birthday of the Katiba. And he said, our baby was very beautiful, the Constitution, but the baby has been trafficked. The child has been trafficked by child traffickers. Now we need to get the child traffickers out of power. And the way to do it is for young people to organize. They're already organized. By the way, there was a time when Raila Odinga and were called the Young Turks. There was a time they were Young Turks. They were the young people who were pushed. So this is eternal vigilance. It goes from one generation to another. If I can send one message, is that we are very hopeful about your energy, about your engagement. And we are praying that that energy goes because we are a constitutional republic, the easiest constitutional way to change government is through the elections. There are other ways that are constitutional that are difficult, there are other ways that are more difficult. If it was a parliamentary setup, it would have been very easy. But because we are a weak African state in terms of our institutional infrastructure, and because there are very many risks that we would not wish to test if we have the option. So if you have the door and you can come through the door, why break through the window? You have the key, which is your vote. Now the lady who asked about how do I go through all these fellows? Why not have your candidates? Why do you need to vote for another candidate? Why not put your candidate? It's difficult. It might sound easy, but for fellows who walk to parliament to kick out and have some meal, it is far much more difficult to face batons and tear gas and bullets than to put your own candidate and organize around ensuring that you get to vote for IEBC. My views on IEBC are radical. My view is that IEBC is not the commissioners. The commissioners might disagree with that. My view is that the IEBC as an institution is established by the Constitution. And the IEBC is commissioners. It is the IEBC, it's an institution. And an institution that has perpetual succession, which means it is there by law, cannot be made dysfunctional because I have refused to appoint some people to. What happens, for example, if we remain this way until 2027? Are we going to say there'll be no general election? So my view is that the IEBC is existing, and the IEBC should work, whether the commissioners are there or not. And I would love to test somebody going to the court to say there are quite a number of wards and maybe one constituency that has representation right now because the IEBC is not conducting its work. I would love for somebody to go to court to say, I am entitled to representation. There is an institution and is refusing to do its work, can force it to do. And if the court delivers that because the function in the event is done by the staff of the IEBC. There is really nothing the Secretariat cannot do that the one or two commissioners would have done. So my view is that the IEBC is an institution, is a constitution, and the Constitution says established. It doesn't say established only when the commissioners are there. By all means, commissioners should be there. And it is really a travesty that we don't have an IEBC function. We should have had constituency review between 10 and 12, between 8 and 12 years. That ended March this year. So right now, we have a whole constitutional process for constituencies which has not been done because IEBC is not there. And it is because it is not costly to the politicians. If politicians knew that when you are not abiding by the Constitution, you'll be kicked out in the next election, believe you me, you will not need to do anything else. I hope I have answered. If there is one I have not, I will come back to it. Thank you very much.
I believe so. Marilyn.
So actually, let's start on the IBC question, because I like the IBC one. But first of all, actually, the Supreme Court Advisory 2 of 2012 has not been stayed. The Supreme Court Advisory 2 of 2012 provided Parliament until August 27th of 2015 to enact legislation or be subject to all the provisions of 261. It continues to be solid law. That's the basis on which MAAAAAY's 2020 advisory was issued. And that means that today, because again, the courts have not stayed the Chief Justice invoking an advisory, today, the Chief Justice is constitutionally obliged to issue an advisory because Parliament since 2020 has still not enacted any legislation. So constitutionally and even in terms of the jurisprudence, there's no bar on either dissolution advisory or the actual dissolution. But to go back to IEBC, I think one of the easy things even for IEBC is IEBC, if they were honest, could have approached the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion. So the truth of the matter is we have a lot of dishonesty here. And here, I would tell anybody interested in accountability, stop listening to people who keep telling you to follow the path. Because if you've paid attention, we've told you, I've been to court, gosh, how many times I can't tell you. How many times have you been, you told us 10 cases, right? I've got a case from 2018 where we challenged the cabinet secretaries, again, unconstitutional. It's not been heard and determined, right? I think we've been heard, maybe, not fully, not determined. It's 2024. So every time you're being told, you know what, there's a great path for this, there's a really good process for this, you're being told to delay, which is deferral, which is going to be denial. Like, please understand that. 2 years means that 2 years for the whole political establishment to regroup. They are already aligning. You give them 2 years, you're not going to be able to take them anywhere. Make no doubt about it. It doesn't matter how well you organize, because what they're doing is organizing with the infrastructure of the state, right? And the money of the state, and they're organizing outside of the law. You are bound by the law. Every time you're being told to follow processes, I think this is one of those times where you need to start asking yourself, okay, who does this benefit, right? I'm a huge mystery fan, so the question is, who benefits, right? When you're trying to figure out who caused the murder. So IBC could go to the Supreme Court and seek an advisory opinion. I agree completely, IBC can continue to function. I do think that, yes, we have nonsense choices. I do think organizing, there's no way around it. And when you're talking about being heard and getting ourselves listened to, what I tell you is it's a long road, lonely road. So get used to not being heard. Yeah. You know why? Do you know what? I've been doing this for like 10 years. And now people talk about dissolution like it's the most natural thing in the world. And I remember talking to a very senior lawyer about dissolution, and she told me that could never happen. She told me, you know what, those are pipe dreams. I know it's in the Constitution, it doesn't work, right? And so all this work we did on dissolution, which we did with, you know, some amazing feminists, and I get credit for work that was done by a huge collective of faceless but really powerful women, mostly women. We had some men as well. All of that work was because we believed in Katiba. We basically just said, you know what, we're gonna push this thing. So I would just keep saying, keep pushing this thing. You already have accountability mechanisms that work. You know, Salimiana, you know, all the things you're doing, you know, highlighting ghost projects, all of those accountability mechanisms were not written anywhere. You developed them. They're creative, they're innovative. Build on those. And as much as possible, start to create new ground and start to bring people to have conversations on your turf. So don't allow the politicians to call you to meetings, right? You have a conversation, have them come to your baraza. You've organized a baraza, 10 people, 20 people, you know, but you already, I think, have the mechanism to politically take this on. I will agree that it still matters to vote. My thing, interrupt power, and interrupting power is power. And let me tell you, there's no one in power who takes you seriously until you can flex power. Promise one day you will take them out of office. They're like, I'm here until that day. But if you take them out of office, you better believe the next day you call those people to a meeting, they will come. So trust yourselves more. The old people like me, we will follow. We will follow eventually. Do you know why? We don't have any better choices. So stop asking us for advice. Stop asking us to listen to you. Just do the thing, the way you did the thing. We're in awe, you know? So continue doing the thing. Maybe, you know, stop listening to us old people so much.
As the Law Society of Kenya, do you subscribe or agree with that? The laid out, necessarily, only laid out for us to get change?
In fact, the only constant thing is change. The Law Society also has Gen Z, and we are feeling, if for lack the pressure, and it's good pressure because it. And I agree. Once you change operating from the norm, you get a differentiated outcome. We have been used to where we regurgitate individual incompetence, and intelligent people are afraid, and incompetent, stupid people are very brave. So every time in the electorate, and someone had raised it here, they actually come out and put their names and, you know, chant slogans, and they seem like, I mean, that's one example. We have a history of a man who a court of competent jurisdiction declared unfit to serve in our community and incarcerated him. And while serving his incarceration, he vied as a member of parliament, vied as a senator, vied as a governor. And so who is the problem? And I agree with Senior. We are not as innocent as we want to believe we are. But coming on the debt question, I will just say this. Happy are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt. That is the bottom truth. Don't say the old don't care or they should care. Don't organize. There is responsible lending and there is responsible borrowing. In regards to the question on the AG, there is a misnomer, or rather a constitutional interpretation where we assume that since the AG sits as a member of cabinet, then when cabinet is being dissolved, the AG should cease holding the office of the AG. The AG is a perpetual office that has a constitutional tenure, and parliament controls this. So even the last, we've been going through a lot of chaos, but in fact, as cabinet is being dissolved, and our history is ripe on this issue, the AG lose office just because cabinet secretaries lose office, not the AG as being a member of the cabinet. And lastly, I am making an appeal because I know we are all Kenyans of goodwill. Let us strive to have better and strong institutions. I like the idea that, and we raised this in the Supreme Court in our presidential amicus application, although Herring and the sister, they took center stage. That was a joke. The point of departure we raised for determination by the Supreme Court was the constitution of IEBC. That question was not answered for one reason or another. And I agree, if we have stronger institutions that will be able to take us further from the Uhuru Ruto case at that time, that elective representatives don't have to adhere to the Chapter 6, Article 10, the issues on good governance, then we will have the mechanism that we are looking for. By a show of hands, we all live in the society that is Kenya. You have relatives who work for government departments or private departments where you can easily foretell how much they earn, but they don't look like what they earn. They live beyond what many people decently live on. And you see, that is an ethical point. I saw one Gen Z, the dad reported him police for participating in Maandamano. And he actually said that the dad is living beyond his means. That is one way of positive action. And I encourage and I support that we should not remain comfortable. We should always be uncomfortable, because that is how we will see the change that we want to see. And I take it very personally that please take this to heart. Happy are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt. It is the youth now who will pay for these debts, because they are structured to go for a longer period of time, some 20, 50 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator Sige.
Thank you. I like the idea of don't agonize, organize. And I think to do so, what I would say, and I want to try and answer all questions in one big sort of mishmash of a response. I think one way we can do that is to plan in parallel. There is no silver bullet. Imagine there is no one. All that we've said here, all of it has to be implemented. All of it has to be executed. And how do we do that? By planning in parallel. Even if, for example, you are on the side of disillusionment, means today, let's just dissolve the parliament and everyone goes home. Or if you believe that you can dissolve in 2027, by the way Senior Councillor said, removing all your members of parliament and bringing more new ones, whichever dissolving that you're leaning towards, you have to remember that no one is coming to save you. I don't know, maybe I'm the youngest on this panel, but no one is going to save us, youth, by the way. I think we have this mentality whereby it's like, oh, we need to have a representative, we need to have an MCA, we need to have a president to take us, to bring Kenya to the next level. No, no one is coming to say, it's up to you. And maybe it's like a colonial mindset. That's how we've been conditioned for decades and generations, because we thought that the Mzungu is the savior and they have all the answers and we're just here to consume and follow. But no one is coming to save us. Education for me is the bottom line. Right now, I believe that our education system is configured in a way to make us subservient. That's what it's doing. We are not supposed to ask questions. We're supposed to cram things. We're learning things that are not fit for purpose for 2024. Our curriculums have all types of gender biases and discriminations of all sorts, whether it's culture, whether it's finance, whether it's what tribe, all of it. And if it's configured in this way and we continue to live by it and say, okay, I'm going to the University of Nairobi, instead of asking, what are the courses at the University of Nairobi? Do they make sense for today? Do they make sense for the next 10 years and next 20 years? Perhaps I should go to a smaller university, but is aligned with what I am thinking as a young person and where I be, rather than just sticking to institutions. Because intelligence is inconvenient. That's what I've learned in my life. And even as people have been asked, or we've been asked, how do we do it? How do we get involved as young people? My life as an example is one of disruption. Is one of, I have a disability. I am a high school kid with a disability. How will I actually function in this world, especially in a country that is so inaccessible and so non-inclusive. How do I do it? I just rocked on, imagine. It doesn't matter what someone said. Someone told me, oh, but will you be able to? I remember I even applied to be in media stations. All media stations that I applied to said, you worked at BBC, but hey, I don't know if you can do what you say you can do. And I'm like, but I've worked at the BBC, so why do you not think I can do what I can say I can do? I had to just keep rocking on. Even in music, I had to keep rocking on. It doesn't matter what people around me are doing or saying or what they believe or what they don't believe, you just rock on. Even me coming into Parliament, I had to bet on myself. I didn't wait for anyone to tell me, disability this, or you can be helped that, I believe it, and I'm saying it so passionately because it really is about betting on yourself. Because dictators and leaders who have or nefarious kind of agendas will always bank on hopelessness. If you are continuing to be hopeless, asking each other questions, how do we, where do we, who will, where, what time, all those questions, people are like, oh good, let them be busy. Because the best way to oppress people, I believe, are three. Number one, keep them focused on things they can't control. Right? Like, high-level politics. You can't control that, imagine. As you and me and people in this room, we can't control that. We're not on those tables. Keep them focused on what they don't have. Opulence. Do you see what people are going here? Everyone is on TikTok saying, goals, relationship goals, vacation goals. That's you being distracted, right? By what you don't have. And number three, to oppress people is to keep them stuck in either the past or a future that has not yet been, sort of like materialized or even substantiated in any kind of way. So you think of the past, the glory days, we've come from far. Or future, we will. That's how people campaign. They sell you promises and covenants that will not even, move an inch after that rally. And so instead of you thinking of the present, that's how they manage to oppress you. And another thing I'll say, don't rely on charisma. Even right now, people you're seeing on TV coming out, using this time as a, lapping up this time, let me say it like that, right? People who you see on social, whatever, and they're like, many youth are like, hey, by the way, that guy or that lady, maybe that should be our representative, maybe that should be our leader. But remember that charisma is not, you should not mix charisma with leadership. Presentation. You should not imagine. The ones who are speaking the loudest, you should actually be cautious of that. So kindly. A solution about, a suggestion about political parties. From an awful bunch, it was asked. You need to get into political parties. If you don't agree with any, create one or go independent, look for independent. You don't have to always go for the big oligarchies that we have seen, right? Do it that way, because at the end of the day, you have to be in a political party in order to play politics. There's no way around it. And I've seen many young people being like, I don't know if I can do it, I'm scared, or I'm not confident, or it's been said here, we're scared of being corrupted. But you're not banking on yourself then. Clearly, that means that you're not banking on yourself. There is a mindset that you don't have yet in order to step into that position in politics or in a political party. I think that doing things like this is really important. Instead of doing Netflix and chill, can you start doing Katiba? Like start using your private time, your evenings, your weekends, your lunch times to do things like this to educate each other. And instead of having watch parties or whatever, have vote parties. Have Katiba parties where you sit and hey, by the way, let's just, atakama ajui by the this Katiba, tukae chini tu, let's just ventilate and see what ideas come out of it. And then don't just talk about it, be about it. I even challenge John and Mark, after this conversation, then what? All these good ideas, will they just dissolve into what happens then? Organizing happens. Like, you need to come up with ideas, discuss, and then have like a plan or a way forward with those ideas that have been discussed, because it will be a shame for all this to be lost.
Challenge, Challenge accepted, but carry on, sorry.
Thank you. I think, well, that's what I'm saying. So basically, all of those things put together, I hope I'm answering your questions. There's one specific one to me about how do you regain trust in your politicians. I think that trust is something that's quite complex. First of all, the people that you're seeking trust from are the ones who broke it, and so they have to be the ones to start. Even like in any relationship, friendship, business partnership, whatever, trust is not just, you don't just walk into a room and gain trust. And if those who work that way, when it's broken, there needs to be something that happens on the other side. For example, the CS nominations, that should have been a step towards the presidency seeking your trust back, you know. Then stay on their necks, you know, put your foot on their neck and continue in these next few months, couple of weeks, whatever it is, half a year, 2 years, whatever. Continue reminding them that you still have to earn my trust back, by the way. It's not guaranteed. I'm not giving it to you yet. So you still have to work. If you say that you're going to create or develop this thing in my constituency and I don't see it in 6 months' time, trust broken. End game. And then you let them know, like has been said in this room, in whatever way, you call them to you and say, you said XYZ, we gave you a deadline, you're going to do this in XYZ time, you haven't, and there's a consequence for that. Covenant, that's what John wrote in his beautiful poem at the beginning, right? You have to do that.
I'm telling you.
It was prophetic.
I'm telling you.
Yes. It's these, and don't forget, young people, we are very forgetful. So how do we make good memes, good jokes, good skits online, and then by whatever time, by Christmas, it will all be about hashtag Mombasa, hashtag Lamu, you know, rather than talking about what we're talking about today, because people have died. People have died, guys. You can't forget people have died for you and I to sit here and have this conversation so that we can think of the best way forward. They put their lives on the line for us. So don't let that go to waste.
Fantastic points. Well done. Mike, you shall have the last word.
Okay, thank you very much, John and Mark, for having given me the opportunity to come here and address the members of the public. Mine will be very simple. I have 3 issues of which I'll say in a nutshell. You spoke about, the lady from Kiambu spoke about the public interest litigation, that most members of the public do not understand what PIL is. I indicated to you that PIL basically it is the Article 22 and 250. You don't require an advocate of the High Court in order to go before the judges and articulate issues. So this is what we normally do. I told you earlier on that with me, I'm not trained in law, but I study the law because the law is good all the time. All the time, the law is good and that is law. That is the way I define it. 1, ensure that you participate in public participation. The problem we have in this country is that the leaders, those who are in authority, do not want the members of the public to know what is it that is taking place. I want to give you a typical example. Learned Counsel is present before us here. During the constitutional implementation review, there was this issue of public participation. Former Minister for Eugene Wamalwa. The bill was brought before the House. Alichukua kaweka huko kwa dustbin. To date, it has not been debated about. If public participation law could have been passed, it could have been easier for us in the devolved system of governance under Article 174. And that did not take place to date. Like if you look at the 5th schedule in which the other council is talking about, if you look at the legislations of which have been passed, judiciary on a judicial service commission, right? Whereby now the judges, judicial service commission can now go through the democracy aspect part of it in appointing a chief justice, which earlier on was being done by the executive. President angekuwa tu anaamka na anasema, today nani you cease to be the chief justice. And I think during Kibaki's time, Learned Counsel walijaribu. As at that time, Kibaki wanted to appoint another gentleman to be, was he Visram, if I'm not wrong? Yes, Visram to be the chief justice. But walisema it did not pass through the Judicial Service Commission, which had the mandate. And also, if you look at the Urban Areas and Cities Act, when it comes to the devolved system of governance, the law was also amended. So we have the amended Urban Areas and Cities Act. Ukiangalia kwa the other ambits or the governance as pertaining to the Constitution. So we are making certain progress when it comes to other legislation. But the issue I have, of which I am thinking of bringing it before the Parliament, is this issue of abduction. About it. I was telling Mark and John that abduction is an international crime because international law form parts of the domestic law of our country. What does ICC say about an enforceable transfer of persons? Because that is forcible transfer, and it falls within the cadre of the international legal instruments, and people are quiet about it. So abduction should fall under that cadre of which if any person, any member of the public has been abducted, but these abductions are not being done by private citizens, done by persons who have been entrusted with public offices, and people are not talking about it. So the lives of have to be respected and protected. If ukishikwa, it means then you'll be violating Article 38 of dignity, which has to be respected and protected. And then this issue of registration of morgues. People are not talking about it. All morgues in the Republic of Kenya should be gazetted. So that we know the number. Under registration, we need to have registration of person officials at the morgue. Whereby they'll be issuing the death certificates. You spoke about ati kuna mtu ameamuka kupiga kura and the rest of the stuff. How can we avoid those loopholes so that we don't get them? It's only when we fine-tune these things. And lastly, I would like to tell fellow Gen Zs who are here. There is this musician who once said that, and I am not afraid to try it on my own. All right? My own. And then there is also another musician who said that, count on me. You can count on me. Why is it that we want to sing for ladies that you can count on us where we're in the bedrooms? But when it comes to the defense of the Constitution, you don't want to be counted. So this is what these musicians have been doing it in America. And that is what has transformed that nation. So we also want to count. I want to hear musicians who are here, like Senator Sige. We want people to count to defense of the Constitution. And this one, Mark and John, we can put it in terms of constitutional challenge. You might even ask a young lawyer that, how many chapters does the Kenyan Constitution have? Do you know, sir? We have 18 chapters in the Kenyan Constitution. So ukiulizwa about chapter 1 talks about what of the Kenyan Constitution. It's about the sovereignty of the people. Then about the republic. So when you want also to ask the young lawyers, how many legislations have been passed with effect towards chapter 1 of the Kenyan Constitution, they are not aware of it. And also, lastly, council, it's about the law school. School is about progression. It is not about retrogression. Who said that in other careers we have academic progression and in law we don't have academic progression? It is an issue we need to check on it. Because if you look at the best, Lord Denning, did he attend any law school? To any law school. But he's the father of law of tort, if I'm not wrong. When he ruled Raylands versus Fletcher, the natural use of land. No. So these are the things of which we, as a people, or we as a nation, we need to understand. That when it comes to the defense of our Constitution, we need to comprehend the law fullest, so that we grow as a nation. Lastly, John.
And this is the last one.
The last one. I may.
You shall.
Yes. As a parting shot, that young people, this country belongs to us. The only challenge we have is that there is this poison of when it look and to eat when it comes to my community members. That is what is killing us. And that is what killed the movement. And I want to give you a small narrative of the bee. You go with it. The bee is not leaderless. It has a leader. The reason for that is that they are making the honey. So when they are making, it is the female bees which will go and look for the nectars. And they'll be seated at the gate. They'll be getting the smell of the scent. Did you get it? Or you did not? It will be sent back again. Because if they fail to bring in the nectar, the queen will not lay the eggs. None. And in those eggs, zitakuwa protected packs of what makes the what? The honey. That is where you'll get. So we have a greater role to play in this republic when it comes to the defense of the Kenyan Constitution. So I'm challenging all of us. We have an obligation, even to our young ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, man. And with that, we come to the end of what's been, in my view.
Can I just quickly say, what Mike say is that women are supposed to be in leadership.
Yeah.
We
got to be.
And you couldn't let that one slide. Like. Thank you. Thank you. Nonetheless, all round. I mean, the analogies here are so rich. We could fill an entire book just from the panelists, but also to the audience here this evening. It's really been fantastic. To the people on X who followed us, all 135 of you, thank you for listening. Thank you for following on and for giving your comments even when we couldn't hear. Step after another in the next collaboration, we should be able to communicate. That's a challenge that we're going to resolve. Mark, I started with a poem. Some might say that I drafted it myself. But might say that, some people. Some, you know, like the people, the leaders of the future, those people. I want to end with one. Drafted in a similar manner, I wouldn't say by whom, but I thought it was, yes, it was interesting. Inner halls where power sways and bends, where oaths were taken, the sacred words now bruised are torn, promises broken, the people forlorn. Parliament stood, a guardian once bold, but now its watch grows weary and laws bent to whims, to greed's cruel hand, leaving justice adrift in this fractured land. But as the sun rises on another day, the people's power holds its sway. Come 2027, the choice is clear. Dream we hold so dear. All right?
By who? That's
oh, this. By who is not important. The message is home. But true, I think Mark and I at the Social Newsroom and Africa Uncensored will be collaborating again to continue these kinds of conversations. We'd encourage that you encourage people to keep coming in the day as it might be on these conversations. And we really are committed, Senator Sige, to holding people's feet to the fire and having these important conversations going forward. Thus, the collaboration. You can follow on socials at TSNR and at AF Uncensored across different platforms. To your point, Michael, about the discussion on abductions and etc. August the 30th disappeared. On August the 29th, we're going to be holding a Twitter space with Missing Voices, KE, obviously, right, the Social Newsroom on that very subject. So if you are listening and if you're in this room, please join in. It is an important subject, one that I've covered for years, and I can tell you the silence around issues like that really is a difference between life and death. So I'd encourage you to continue joining in. At this point, my thanks to you, Mark, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to our panelists and to our audience here who've been very patient, and to the team behind this, those who've joined us on the X space, and also Mheshimiwa Naisula Lesuda, she wrote in because she still followed the conversation as she went back on the road, and she says, yes, it is the Gen Zs who had the courage to stand up for accountability and getting their voices heard. Since we didn't